Okay, so here's a question for you. Is there a program out there that actually gives companies a financial reason to hire a foreign graduate over an American one? Well, that's the argument we're going to break down today, and it all revolves around a program called OPT. Let's dive in.
All right, so let's set the scene. Imagine two recent grads, both super smart, both applying for the exact same job. One is a U.S. citizen, maybe with some student debt. The other is a foreign student who's here on a program called OPT. Now, the argument we're looking at today claims that, from a company's perspective, one of these candidates actually comes with a pretty big discount. So to figure out why, we've got to first understand what this OPT thing even is.
So what exactly is this program? Well, OPT, it stands for Optional Practical Training. Basically, the source material explains it as a way for foreign students on an F-1 visa to get work experience here in the U.S. And get this, if they're in a STEM field, science, tech, engineering, or math, they can work for up to 3 years after they graduate. And it's right here, within this program, that we find the financial incentive that's at the core of this whole discussion.
Okay, so we've got the what down. We know what OPT is. But really, the heart of this argument isn't just about who gets to work where. It's about the money. The source we're looking at claims there is a really powerful financial reason, an incentive, that's just baked right into the system. So the big question is, what is it? And here's the number. The number at the absolute center of this whole thing is 15.4%. The source identifies this as a huge tax discount, one that a company gets when they hire a graduate through the OPT program. So where in the world does a number like 15.4% come from? Let's break it down. All right, so how do we get to 15.4%? It all comes down to FICA taxes. Those are the taxes that get taken out of your paycheck to fund Social Security and Medicare. Well, the source points out that under OPT, both the employee and the employer are exempt from paying them. So you've got 7.7% saved on the employee's side and another 7.7% saved on the employer's side. You add those two together, and boom, there's your 15.4% hiring incentive.
And this is where the author makes a pretty bold claim, calling it the most shocking part. The argument is this: since these are Social Security taxes that are just not being collected, the cost of this entire discount is essentially being paid for by the Social Security system. And this is all happening, the source notes, at a time when we hear a lot about that very system being under some serious financial strain.
Okay, so that's the financial piece. Now let's look at what the source claims are the consequences of this incentive. It's presented as a kind of chain reaction, a ripple effect that spreads out from that one tax break. And this really gets to the core of the problem, according to the source material. Look at this statistic. It claims that 50% of new U.S. graduates in STEM fields never manage to land that first critical job in their field. The argument being made is that they're being passed over for candidates who, frankly, come with that tax discount we just talked about.
And it's not just about that first job. This quote from the source really tries to connect the dots to the long term, the human cost. The author's point is that when these American grads can't get their foot in the door, it's not just a short-term problem. It can actually damage their entire career, their future earnings, and, to bring it full circle, their ability to contribute to that very same Social Security system.
So if we were to sum up who the source says is being negatively affected by all this, it really boils down to 3 groups. First, obviously, are the U.S. citizen graduates trying to get those jobs. Second, the source specifically highlights minority graduates in STEM, who it says are already underrepresented. And third, the Social Security system itself, which is presented as losing out twice, once from the unpaid taxes of OPT workers and again from the lower earnings of underemployed U.S. grads.
All right, so that's the problem as it's laid out in the source. But the author doesn't just stop there. They propose a solution, and they call it the U.S. apprenticeship idea. So how would this U.S. apprenticeship idea actually work? Well, it's laid out as a simple 3-step plan. Step 1, you take the current system with its 15.4% discount for hiring OPT workers. Step 2, you get rid of that discount. And then step 3, and this is really the whole point, you take that exact same discount and you reroute it. You apply it to incentivize companies to hire and train recent U.S. citizen graduates instead. So the idea is it's not a new cost, it's just a redirection of an existing incentive. And what's the big selling point for this proposal? It's that zero-cost claim. The argument is that because you're not creating a new tax break out of thin air, but just moving an existing one from one group to another, the whole thing could be done at literally zero cost to the government.
So, if this were to happen, what are the supposed benefits? Well, the source claims it would do a few things. It would jumpstart the careers of U.S. citizens, it would give companies a huge reason to invest in training American graduates, and in the long run, it would actually increase payments into Social Security. The author wraps it all up by saying it would fix what they call a horrible discrimination built right into our tax code.
And that brings us to the final question, the one that really sits at the heart of this entire debate. The source basically asks us to step back from the specifics of OPT for a second and just consider this. Should a tax code ever be used to give a financial advantage to hiring one group of new workers over another? That's the big, provocative question we're left with.